So thank you for joining our second webinar of this spring 2025 semester. Today we will be talking about community resources that can support your family, your student, your client, depending on who you are, before they go to college, while they're in college, and after college. The key part of today's webinar will be Darby Remley, who is our guest speaker from DVR, which means that everything I talk about, I'm going to kind of quickly roll through so that I can leave as much time as possible for Darby. And then if we have extra time at the end, I can come back and answer any questions, share anything, all that kind of stuff. So pre-warning that I will be a bit quick, I will say, but I will do my best to not leave out any of the key details. So with that, my name is Elise Kramer. I am the program coordinator for In Pathways to Inclusive Higher Education. Thank you again for joining me on this beautiful Wednesday evening. If after today you're left with all kinds of questions, contact me. All of that is my direct information. So feel free to give me a call, a text, an email, anything you need. I'm happy to help. And I will introduce Darby when we get to her portion. If you are new to our webinar series, when you've received this PowerPoint tomorrow, you can click that link. You can sign up for the remaining webinars in our series. There will be Q&A time throughout. You are also welcome to interrupt me at any point. You can put questions in the chat. You all know how Zoom works by this point, so have at it, and I will answer your questions as I have time. And then at the very end, there's going to be a brief feedback survey. Ideally, that takes you 30 seconds or less. So please fill that out so that I can make sure our future webinars meet your needs. And then lastly, this recording will be sent to you tomorrow, along with any related resources, such as this slideshow. All right, so it doesn't look like we have a lot to tackle today, but we do, so I will jump right in. So I am from a nonprofit in Pathways to Inclusive Higher Education. As an organization, our mission statement is this part on the left. We work to foster academic growth, social development, greater independence, and career advancement for college students with intellectual disability. Our four main focuses are these blue boxes on the right. I say all that just to note, we don't actually provide any of the direct services on campus. So if I need to, I will find out some of your answers. We do have Julie on the call as well as Lauren on the call. So great resources from some of our programs. That's just not me. So just a little FYI there. All right, so jumping right into inclusive higher ed. As I said, this is going to be pretty brief so that I can leave as much time for Darby as possible. But just to say in a few bullet points, inclusive higher ed provides an alternative admission pathway for students with intellectual disability and or other students who would require academic modifications to be successful collegiately. With that said, students do earn a certificate credential rather than a degree. So if you think your student could be successful in college on a degree path, that might be a better option for them. Students are fully included into their peers' courses. There is not necessarily a segregated special education, program that happens to be on a college campus. They are full college students sitting in the same courses with their peers, same professors. They just happen to receive additional supports. All of their courses are in line with their dream career goals so that they are trained for whatever job they want to have after college, and Darby will talk more about that as well. And then all along the way, they participate in career readiness, in independent living. They are members of their campus community, eating in the dining hall and going to football games and all that kind of fun stuff that college students do. And they receive staff and peer mentor support in what we call the 4 pillars of academics, social, career, and independence. Again, for time, I'm not going to talk about the specific supports they receive in each of these categories. I do that in plenty of other webinars. So for now, I'm just going to keep rolling through. But if you have specific questions, I would be happy to answer them. All right, so where in Colorado offers inclusive higher ed? The first is the Office of Inclusive Services at UCCS. This is a fully accredited IHE program. So what that means is while the other universities and colleges have their own accreditation, the Office of Inclusive Services has gone through a pretty extensive process to receive accreditation on its own, which is pretty exciting. That is in Colorado Springs. They offer on-campus living there. For students who live locally, they can choose to commute if they would like. And that is a 4-year college program. Elevate at Arapahoe Community College is in Littleton. That is a commuter campus. Students often take the light rail, the bus, Uber, they drive themselves, all kinds of things like that. And that is a 3-year college program. Global Inclusive at Regis, they do offer on-campus living. Again, students can choose to commute if they would like. There's a 1-year track, a 2-year track, a 3-year track, and a 4-year track at Regis. And then University of Northern Colorado has the GOAL program, that stands for Go On and Learn. That is in Greeley. They offer on-campus living, and that is a pretty traditional 4-year college program. And then all 4 of these inclusive higher education options have received what's called CTP certification. And what that means is students are eligible for federal financial aid. Another reminder, at the end, students do walk out with that certificate credential rather than a degree. That is a very weighty, it's a very meaningful credential. It's not something that I like to say your grandma, made it in crayon on the kitchen table. It means something. It shows that students went through college and learned something. But again, as a reminder, it is not a degree, and that is sometimes a misunderstanding that some people have. So I like to make that very clear. And then oftentimes people ask, when can I apply? And typically applications will open sometimes around like Thanksgiving-ish, sort of the end of first semester, and then they'll tend to close towards the end of January, end of February, sometimes end of March, depending on the program for the following year. So you do typically apply, could be like 8 months before the school year begins. So just keep that in mind. And then this school year, both CSU and MSU Denver have jumped aboard the IHE train as well. CSU's is more geared towards students who are studying things in the agricultural trades. MSU's is a much more traditional program where students have a bit more choice in that. CSU is 3 years, MSU is 4. And then next school year, Lamar Community College and Pikes Peak State College will both be joining as well. So Cultivate at Lamar, they're both 3-year programs. Cultivate will have on-campus living in probably 3-ish school years, we think. Pikes Peak State College is a commuter campus through and through. And then all 4 of these programs have that CTP certification in progress. So what that means is students will have access to federal financial aid once that CTP has been granted. CSU and MSU should ideally have that before next school year. LCC and PPSC will probably need an additional school year beyond that. And then again, they will all get that same statewide certificate. All right, so as I go through some of these community resources, as I said, I am going to go through them a little bit briefly so that I can leave lots of time for Darby. I will do my best to note which ones will be useful before college, during college, and after college, or sometimes it's all 3. If I forget, please remind me and I will try to share that as well. So before we even get there, I think it's important to talk about this concept of braiding of supports. So what that means is there's a variety of organizations out there that can serve you, that can serve your family, that can serve your student, depending again on who you are. But no organization has the capacity or the ability to do everything. So it's important to keep in mind braiding of supports, which is using multiple agencies or multiple services that each have a clearly defined role. So there are separate services that happen simultaneously. So a lot of these organizations that I will chat about, you might want to contact all of them. Some of them you might only want to contact one of them, right? So that's kind of up to you to figure out what is best for your family, for your student, for you, and for each situation. All right, so we're going to start with case management agencies, or CMAs. You may formerly have known the term CCBs. So these are organizations that may be able to offer financial support during college or sometimes even before college. Not all of them offer financial support during college. Mainly, it's the CMAs that have access to mill levy funding that can do that. But they will also provide waiver services. Many of your students will need waiver services during college, before college, and after college. And so CMAs, no matter where you are in your college timeline, can be really, really helpful community resources to provide a variety of services for you or for your students. They can also be really helpful in continuing services when your students are on summer break, where they're home for a few months at a time, right? Where they're not receiving direct supports from the university staff during those time periods. And then I think a pretty important piece of that as well is they can help students gain their own awareness of what types of services they need in the long term, or what benefits will be helpful for them to access, whether they're in college or they're out of college. And they can also help students navigate their communities, and that could be their college community, that could be their home community. But it is important to know that CMAs are geographically based, often by county. And so if you have not gotten in contact with your CMA, again, I will be sending this out tomorrow. Please click that link and please find your own CMA. They will only serve you based on, again, where you live. All right. The ARC is going to be helpful both before college and during college and after college. So they do a lot of child advocacy work, which often takes the form of IEP advocacy. So a lot of ARC advocates can attend IEP meetings or can chat with families or teachers prior to IEP meetings to kind of come up with a good game plan. That's often what the child advocacy piece looks like. Not always, but I would say that is the most common. In terms of adult advocacy, which is really helpful, both during and after college, they can help do things like find housing, help with employment, help with Medicaid supports, help figure out things like SSI and SSDI. They have conversations with families about guardianship and power of attorney. They can help with respite care, community connections, all kinds of things. And then they also do a lot of systems advocacy work, like legislation and public policy. That may not be what you use them for your day-to-day, but just to kind of put out there what ARC chapters do. And just like CMAs, these tend to operate geographically by city or county. So I encourage you to find your local chapter of the ARC and contact them. Get involved and find out what they can do specifically for your family based on what stage you are in. Okay, ABLE accounts. These are a bit broader than just college. They are absolutely helpful no matter what stage of life you are in, before, during, or after college. They are specifically helpful during college because they can help pay for college. So these are savings accounts specifically for people with disabilities. They're qualifying disabilities. If you qualify for inclusive higher ed, you very likely qualify for an ABLE account. And that used to be that you had to qualify before 26. Starting next year, it's going to be increased to 46. Again, if you're a college-age student, you probably meet that threshold anyway, but it can be used on any disability-related expense. So that can be housing, that can be education, that could be a wide variety of things. 529 funds cannot be used to pay for inclusive higher education. 529 funds can only be used for degree programs, which inclusive higher education is not. So if you have funds in a 529, there is a free transfer into an ABLE account up to the yearly maximum. And if you have questions about that, we just did a webinar featuring our friend Mike Keglowitz from Colorado ABLE last semester. And so you can, again, click this link, watch that webinar, and hear all of his really fun and interesting facts about ABLE accounts. And then the Colorado Office of Employment First is a group that focuses on competitive employment. They can support potential employees. So this is a great place to go both during and after college, or if you're not going to go to college, to contact them right away then as well. So for potential employees, they can support career exploration, skills training, and then the most important piece I think they offer is benefits counseling. So if you are wondering, can I work? Will I still receive benefits if I'm earning an income? Their benefits counseling, they do it both like one-on-one sessions, but they also have an online like system that you can kind of take some asynchronous courses with. That's a really great resource as well. And then they also do employer training. So if you know an employer who may be interested in hiring someone with a disability, but maybe they have some misgivings or some concerns, Colorado Office of Employment First will help provide training for those employers as well. And I did not mean to just click this video.
My office, the Colorado office.
We did just do a webinar with them, or not just, 2 semesters ago, did a webinar with them. So you can watch that as well, where they really go in depth talking about the benefits counseling. All right, and again, I know I'm moving quickly, but let me know if there are questions. Centers for Independent Living, these are great community resources for after college. So this is a supported living option specifically geared towards the disabled community. They provide tools, they provide resources, all kinds of community integration support. Even if you or your student does not want to live independently, they are still really great resources for helping you navigate the community where you live, regardless of where you live. So they do focus on equal access, self-determination, peer support, inclusion, all kinds of things, as I said, beyond just the independent living piece. And again, this is a theme, they are geographically located. So you should find your local Center for Independent Living to figure out where is the best place for your student to go to access their supports. And then travel training agencies. I really recommend getting in contact with these before college. College staff typically do help with travel training as well. And then after college, it's never a bad thing to brush up on those skills either. So these are agencies that will support students in learning how to use public transportation. If you live in the Denver metro area, right, that would be RTD, for example. They can also help with Uber or other forms of transportation support that exist out there. And there are a ton. So I've just linked to a few of them that exist, but again, there are many. So Dr. Mac is a common one. MTM Transit is a common one. Ride NoCo exists for people in the Fort Collins, Greeley, Loveland kind of areas. Mobility for All is in the Boulder area. There are a ton. And I would recommend Googling travel training in X county, and you'll certainly find support with that. And then parent groups are a great one. This is great for any age or stage, no matter where your student is. There are tons of parent groups that will provide training, they'll provide information, they'll provide technical assistance, they'll even provide support groups for parents of kids with disabilities. There are tons of them out there, such as Peak Parent, Parent to Parent, Family Voices, Show and Tell. El Grupo Vida is one specific for Spanish-speaking families. There are a ton, and they are even more helpful in connecting you to additional community agencies and resources, because I cannot possibly include them all in an hour, and I know I am missing some. So those are great resources as well. And then PASAs, or Program Approved Service Agencies. So these are agencies that can take your Medicaid waiver dollars and provide various community services. So that could be home care, that could be help with medical care, all kinds of different things. Again, there are tons of them. Here are just a few common examples, such as Easter Seals, Pasco, Stepping Stones, Drive. There's a ton. The state of Colorado keeps a whole list. There's more than 500. You can explore the list there. I've linked it there for your own research. But again, I cannot possibly list them all. There are a ton. There are over 500 across the state. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention Think College. So if you are someone who is seeking college for your student or for yourself, so this would be a community resource for before college. This is the National Resource Hub for Inclusive Higher Education. They have resources, they have training, they have technical assistance. When I'm looking for something, the first place I go is Think College. If they don't have it, probably nobody does. They have everything, it seems like. And I think the coolest thing that they offer is a national directory of all-inclusive higher ed options across the country. They even link to an organization that kind of does what Think College does in Europe. So if you have a global traveler who wants to go to college in like Ireland, they could, and Think College can help them get there. And they also have lots of resources for families, as well as lots of resources for students. These include things like, what questions do I ask when I'm in an interview for inclusive higher ed? It also includes things like, how do I write an IEP goal to help my student get to college? All kinds of things. And you can visit their website there. All right, I know that was so brief and so quick. What questions can I answer before I turn it over to Darby? All right. I'm going to take that as none. I am going to turn it over to Darby. Before I do, I quickly want to just mention why Darby's here, how important the DVR connection really is. So not only does DVR help with career preparation and exploration before college, They can also provide some need-based financial support, so they can help pay for the really expensive cost that is college these days. And they can also, again, like other agencies, provide continued services during school breaks as well as after graduation, all kinds of things DVR can do, including connecting with employers regionally based on wherever you're located. So you may go to college in Denver, but maybe you live in Grand Junction. DVR can kind of help make some of those connections when if your student moves back home. And they can also help with ongoing skill refinement, all fun things that Darby's going to talk about.
So my name is Darby Remley. I am the Supported Employment Coordinator and Trainer with the Division of Voc Rehab, or DVR, as you know us. We are an agency under the Department of Labor and Employment specific to helping individuals with disabilities to gain employment. And so really our role is to provide services to help you get a job. So, and whatever activities and whatever things you choose to do along the way. And that's kind of where inclusive higher ed comes into that. That's usually along your path to employment. So, yeah, we can provide lots and lots of different things. So I'm going to give you just an overview of the ways that we can support individuals to ultimately get to that end goal of employment. Next slide, please. All right. So we're just going to briefly go over what our DVR process looks like. So some people come to us and think that we just have a drawer of jobs to be able to give people. And unfortunately, that is not how our system works. Everything about DVR and the services we provide is individualized to the person we serve. So as far as the types of jobs we're going to help people get, it's all based on what they want to do. So I'm going to go over what that process looks like, all the way from applying for our services, all the way to having a job and your case being closed successfully with DVR. We'll touch on each of those, what we call DVR statuses. So referral and initial engagement, what does just starting the DVR process look like? Eligibility, what is required in order to be found eligible for DVR? Comprehensive assessment and plans for employment. So how do we come up with a plan? How do we identify a job goal for you? How do we determine what services are needed to obtain that job goal? And then that service provision piece. So once you enter into a plan, what does it look like when we're actually providing services? And that's really where inclusive higher ed falls, because that is a service that we support. And then all the way, like I said, the end goal is to get you into a job that you love and your case being closed successfully with us. I always used to tell individuals that I worked with that I look forward to the day you get to fire me, because that means that you have a job and it's a job that you want. All right, next slide. All right, perfect. Okay, so this is just our DVR overview. So we're going to go into each one of these statuses a lot more in depth, but this just really gives you that timeline so you can have an idea of what to expect if you're going to apply to DVR. Our services are not instantaneous. From the time you apply, services aren't available immediately. We serve a lot of people through DVR, so we do have to give ourselves these timelines to be able to take the time to make people eligible and develop those plans. So from the time that you apply with DVR, we do have 30 days to get you in for that first meeting, or what we call the initial engagement meeting. Again, we're collecting all that information, getting you into our system, and getting that meeting scheduled with a DVR counselor that is going to oversee your caseload. And they're going to be the one that's going to help find you eligible and also help you to write a plan. From the time that you have that initial engagement meeting, we have 60 days to make you eligible. So during that 60 days, during that initial engagement meeting, they may have you sign some releases for information. We may reach out to your medical providers to gather that documentation. And so again, that's why we give ourselves those 60 days, because sometimes it's not always fast gathering that medical documentation. And then from the time you're found eligible with DVR, you and your counselor have 90 days to get you into a plan. So during that time, it's what we call comprehensive assessment. So you're going to be working with your DVR counselor to identify a job goal and identify the services needed to obtain that job goal and develop what's called your IPE, your individualized plan for employment. Not to be mistaken for an IEP, which is what you have in school. This is an IPE, which is what you have with DVR. So once you enter into a plan with DVR, our ultimate goal is to get you stable in a job, find you a job that you love and get you stable in that job. And then once you're in a job and it's a job you want to be in and this is where you want to stay, we're going to monitor you for 90 days in that job once you reach stability. And then the ultimate goal is to successfully close your case in that job. But do just note that this timeline is just for your case. So if we did successfully close your case in a job and something changed, maybe you wanted to find a better job, or maybe that job wasn't working out and you wanted to find a new job, you could absolutely come back and apply again to DVR. There's no limit to how many times an individual can come through the system, as well as we also understand that things change in people's lives, and maybe they wanted to pursue employment at one point and then something changed and they had to put that on pause. So we've also closed cases where they just couldn't pursue employment at that time. But then when they were ready to start pursuing employment, they came back and reapplied and we started the process over again. So again, we understand that things come up in your life and things may change. Of course, as I said, our ultimate goal is to get you to that successful closure and in a job, but we also understand that things change in everyone's lives. Next slide. All right, so the first step in the DVR process is that initial engagement. So to just give you a little numbers, so for our fiscal year 2023, the previous year, so I'm showing you a little bit older numbers because they haven't come out with our 2024 annual report yet. So I'm showing you the numbers from 2023, but the total individuals we served in full VR cases and our YP cases, which are our youth cases, we served 16,574 individuals last fiscal year. So, so to just kind of give you a picture, that's why we give ourselves those 30, 60, 90 days, because we do serve a lot of individuals through DVR. Next slide. All right. So how do you apply to DVR? How do you get connected with us if you want to apply? So the first thing that you want to do is to fill out our DVR interest form. So on the bottom of this slide, that's an active link to get to that DVR interest form. So you can click on that and that'll take you to our website where you can fill that out. So that DVR interest form is pretty quick. I think we timed it and it took someone 2 minutes to fill out. It can take longer if you wanted to add a lot of information. So you can upload your resume, you can add stuff about your work history, you can upload your medical documentation. That isn't required to apply for DVR. That's all stuff your DVR counselor is going to ask for as you are going through the DVR process. So if you don't want to take the time to do that now, you will do it later down the road. If you just want to get your information in there so you can get an initial engagement meeting scheduled, you can actually just put the basic information in there and we can get that information a little later. But getting connected with DVR and filling out this DVR interest form is that first step. So it's going to get us all the basic information that we need in order to get you into that system. So from the time you enter all that information into that DVR interest form, you're going to get an email in return that says, hey, we got your interest form. Someone will be contacting you to set up an initial engagement meeting. And so the goal is that that initial engagement meeting happens within 30 days of that DVR interest form being filled out. So you'll have your DVR interest form completed, and then someone will reach out about getting that meeting scheduled. Okay. So again, to just kind of show you some numbers, different applications that we've gotten throughout different months. Of course, we see a lot of them early kind of in the school year sometimes, because especially when people want to go to inclusive higher ed programs, a lot of people will apply during that time or need services. And then we see our numbers go a little bit down during the summer because a lot of people like to take the summer off or don't want to work during the summer and want to go back in the fall months. But yeah, in the spring we see lots of numbers because again, people are looking for jobs during that time. They may want to take off the holidays, and so again, we don't see many applications during that time. But we get lots and lots of people who apply to DVR. Next slide. Okay, so there's going to be some goals during initial engagement. And Elise, you can just kind of click and so all three of the boxes will show up. Perfect. So there's some different goals that the DVR counselor is going to want to achieve with you when you are at your intake meeting and having that initial engagement. The first being that they're going to educate you about the DVR process. So kind of all the information I'm giving you today, they're going to give you even more of how you guys are going to work together. They're going to give you those time frames. They're going to show you that 30, 60, 90 days, the same thing. They're going to set up next steps with you. When's your next meeting? When should you expect that eligibility letter? They're going to talk about what are the requirements of working with DVR. And one of the big requirements we have is active engagement. If the DVR counselor is going to work hard to try and get you a job, we want to see that same active engagement from you as well. And then, of course, everything that we do is about informed choice. During the DVR process, we're going to give you lots and lots of information, but at the end of the day, you get to decide the direction that we take. The DVR counselors are going to put a lot of work into building rapport with you. They want to start a really good working relationship with you so that they can best understand you and best support you as you're on your employment journey. They're always going to try and create a welcoming environment for you and inquire with lots of questions, both from you and from them, so that they can really get to know who you are and how they can best support you. And then, of course, the main thing that they're going to do is just gather lots and lots of information. Like I said, if you don't want to put the stuff into that DVR interest form during the initial engagement meeting, they might give you some homework on things that you may have to provide to them or give to them. So they're going to get demographics about where you live in the state, talking about some of your work history. They are going to ask about disability information. We are an agency that specifically serves the disability community, and so we do have to collect documentation of disability to find you eligible. So we are a little bit different. A lot of times I feel like our whole lives we're being told, don't talk about the things you can't do. Well, at DVR, we want to know about those things because that's the best way we can understand who you are and how we can support you to overcome those barriers to achieve employment success. And then we're also going to talk just about technology and access because we definitely want to make sure you have all the tools that you need in order to access the jobs that are out in your community. All right, next slide. Okay. And just really as far as this process, you know, our ultimate goal is to get the information that we need in this meeting to find you eligible for DVR. Our hope is that we can gather this documentation as quickly as possible. Like I said, we have 60 days to make you eligible from the time of this initial engagement meeting. But if we're able to gather all of this information even quicker than that, we can usually find someone eligible quicker than that 60 days. So again, like I said, they might send you with some homework to gather some medical documentation for them or fill out some forms for them. But that's really their way of making sure that we're moving timely through the process and getting you in and getting you eligible for DVR as quickly as we can. All right, next slide. Okay, so that was initial engagement. Any questions before we go into eligibility?
What if I already have a DVR plan?
Okay, so are you actively working with your DVR counselor?
I don't know anymore, but my DVR counselor is Rebecca Kennedy, I think.
Okay, so Rebecca is in I believe, our Denver Metro office.
Okay.
So if you want, at the end here, I can put or Elise, I don't know if you'd be able to put just our website in the chat.
Mhm.
And you can go on there and you can look up each individual office and their
Mhm.
contact information. So you could just call into that office and ask for Rebecca, if you don't already have her phone number or don't have an email.
Okay.
And they can get you connected with her and you can find out if your case is still open with DVR.
Okay.
And
Okay,
then,
cool.
yeah,
Mhm.
and then if you are still currently in a plan with her, but let's say maybe your plan doesn't have inclusive higher ed services on it, and that's what you're interested in, yeah, get a meeting scheduled with her and start having those conversations so she can update your plan to add inclusive higher ed services.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I will include that link in the chat and I will also send it out in the follow-up email tomorrow morning. So you should receive that twice.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elise.
Yes. Does anyone else have any other questions before we keep chugging?
Perfect. All right, next slide. All right, so as I said, in order to be found eligible for DVR, we do have to show that there is documentation of a disability and that disability presents barriers to employment. So how we do that is by showing that your disability causes the individual an impairment, that they have a physical or mental impairment, that disability is an impediment. So the individual's physical or mental impairment constitutes or results as a substantial impediment to employment and has some sort of impact on them successfully becoming employed. So they need VR services, vocational rehabilitation services, in order to be successfully employed. So really that's what we're looking for when we're gathering that medical documentation is, do you have a documented disability that makes it hard to get a job and keep a job? Next slide. All right. So there is certain criteria that has to be met. So this kind of mimics the slide before, but really we have to have that medical documentation. So if you're coming and applying to DVR, that might be something you could do as you're waiting to get in for that initial engagement meeting. Reach out to your doctor, reach out to your case manager, reach out to your special education teacher, because they would have all of that medical documentation that you would need, and maybe a copy of your IEP, because what that documentation is it has to be signed by a doctor. So what it has to be official documentation. So if you do come into that initial engagement meeting and you don't have that stuff with you, the DVR counselor will just have you sign a release of information and we'll send for that information. Or let's say maybe you don't have any documentation. I know there's a disability there, but there's no documentation. So again, still apply to DVR. We may send you for some assessments through some medical providers so that we can gather that documentation. So there's different ways that we can get that documentation if need. And like I said, it's those disabilities that prevent people from getting jobs and keeping jobs, and that you require VR services in order to get a job and keep a job. Next slide. All right, and when we are looking at this medical documentation, we're looking for these specific functional limitation areas. So when you think about your disability, does it present barriers to the different to these different functional limitation areas? So at least you can just keep clicking and I'll keep reading these. So the different functional limitation areas are communication, interpersonal skills, mobility, motor skills, self-care, self-direction, work skills, and work tolerance. So again, as we're completing your eligibility, we're going to be looking at your medical documentation and saying, oh, okay, they have this disability and that presents a barrier to their communication. So that we know that you're going to be found eligible for our services because you have barriers in these different areas. I saw something come into the chat that said, I don't have that. I'm not sure who said that. If you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself and letting me know what you don't have.
Hi, is my name is Hendrika Speed. I am a second year, have interest in university with all my friends out there, and I don't have DVR yet. I don't know. I don't have it yet, but I don't think so. So yeah, that's all for now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So one of those first slides that I talked about, that DVR interest form, that's where you'd want to fill that out or possibly reach out to one of your support people to have them help you fill that out. And that's how we could get you connected with DVR. Okay. All right, perfect. All right, next slide, please. All right. So when we talk about working with individuals with disabilities, there isn't just one or two disabilities that we work with. We really work with a whole scope of disabilities. Again, if you have a disability that presents a barrier to employment or hits any of those functional limitation areas, we can find you eligible and work with you. So these are just some of the numbers of the different individuals that we serve, all the way from ranging from individuals with brain injury, autism, mental health diagnosis, deaf, hard of hearing, blind and low vision, intellectual and developmental disabilities, physical disorders, and other. So we work with really anybody. So even if you feel like you have a disability, but maybe it's not a real significant disability, if you're still having trouble with getting work and keeping work, apply to DVR and we can see if we can find you eligible. Next slide. All right, so the next step in the DVR process is comprehensive assessment and developing that plan. So as the DVR counselor is working with you, so this is after you've been found eligible with DVR, they are going to start planning with you, and everything they plan with you is all going to be person-centered. So how I used to explain our process is, you imagine a car. You're the one that's driving. You're going to tell us where you want to go and how you want to get there. And I'm just in the back seat making sure we don't get lost, don't run out of gas, or don't crash along the way. So we're just going to help guide you there, but ultimately it's in the direction that you want to go. So we're going to be able to provide lots of support, lots of information, but ultimately you are the one that directs your VR case. And your DVR counselor is always going to empower you to do that. So if you have lots of support people in your life, we'd love to have those support system people in your DVR meetings, but ultimately that DVR counselor is going to be listening to you first and foremost about what you want to do. Next slide. All right. So during comprehensive assessment, this is when the DVR counselor is going to be working with you to develop your plan, your IPE, your individualized plan for employment. And so they're going to do different activities with you. They might be gathering more information on who you are, and through that building more rapport with you. They're going to start discussing and exploring career pathways with you. So what are the types of things that you're interested in? What do you like to do? What have you done in the past that you really enjoyed doing? They may do some work assessments with you, doing things like interest inventories or personality assessments to really get to know you and what your abilities are. They may identify accommodations and assistive technology needs. Are there anything that you need to have in place at a job to be able to help you to access the work and be successful at the work? Discussing barriers and identifying necessary supports. Again, we want to hear about those things that might be hard for you to do, or things that you can't do, so that we can hopefully help you to overcome those barriers. And then ultimately we're going to try and identify an employment goal and get you into a plan that's going to have a whole list of services on it. So this process is very collaborative. So when I talked about at the very beginning about how the DVR counselor is going to be very active in helping you find a job, and we need that same sort of engagement on your part. You got to be very active with your DVR counselor, because it is a collaborative process. Like I said, we don't just have jobs to hand out to people. We got to understand who you are and what you want to help you to try and find a job. Next slide. All right. So during comprehensive assessment, we are going to ask lots of questions around what we call our big eight. So they're going to talk about what are your strengths? What are the resources you have in your life? What kind of supports do you have? Do you have benefits? Do you have Social Security benefits? Do you have insurance? Do you have support people in your life? What are your priorities? What are the things that are most important to you when you think about getting a job? What are your concerns? What are you worried about when we start looking for work? What are your abilities? What are the things you're able to do? What are the types of jobs that you have done in the past? What are your capabilities? What can you do? Your interests, what types of jobs are you interested in? And of course, informed choice, making sure that all of these big eight things, ultimately, you're the one that gets to decide and give us that information and deciding what kinds of jobs you want to start pursuing. Next slide. All right. One part of comprehensive assessment, so as we're developing a plan, is we have to complete what's called a financial needs analysis. And this is where we verify the financial need of someone as we're providing different services. Now, DVR has a core set of services that we provide at no cost to anyone. So if someone was just wanting to come in and get a job, that's part of our core set of services, just helping them look for jobs, apply for jobs, and then get support on the job when they have it. Those are all core set of services. But when you start talking about kind of those higher cost services, so when you start talking about training programs or inclusive higher ed programs, we do have to look at that financial need. And so how that works is that the DVR counselor is going to work with you to look at your income. Do you have any liquid assets? Do you have any qualifying deductions? And then basically they come up with a number of what might be your contribution if you have one, and then what DVR can support financially. If you have Social Security benefits, you are exempt from this step. We don't have to do a financial needs analysis. We don't have to look at your financial need. But if you don't receive Social Security benefits, this is a required part of DVR if we're going to support an inclusive higher ed program. Right, next slide. And so through all of that, through pulling all that information out of comprehensive assessment, talking about the big eight, talking about the financial need, we want to develop your IPE, your individualized plan for employment. And this is going to be a plan that is individually tailored to you specifically, that is going to list a job goal that you came up with. This is something you want to pursue, and all the services that are necessary to reach that goal. So this is basically the accomplishment of all the hard work you and your DVR counselor did to identify what the next steps are, what types of services you're going to move forward with. So to give you a little bit more information, as of August in our fiscal year 2022, 76.3% of our plans were completed before 90 days. So from the time someone is found eligible to them entering into a plan, that DVR counselor has 90 days to get them into a plan. But as you can see by these numbers, a lot of times we don't take 90 days to help that person develop a plan. So if you're coming and applying to DVR and you have a good idea of what you want to do for work, what you want that employment goal to be, or maybe you have some work experience, so you know the types of services that you need when you're working to feel supported, those are all going to be really good things to be able to tell your DVR counselor so that it doesn't take a full 90 days to develop your plan. Okay, next slide. All right, so before we go into services, any questions about eligibility, comprehensive assessment, or ultimately getting to into that plan? All right. Well, then we will move into services. So with DVR services, this is really when the process starts. So it seems like with those 30, 60, 90 days, that's a long time that it takes to actually start the services. But again, as you saw, we have to collect lots of information. The DVR counselor has to get to know who you are and what kind of things you want to do to write that plan. So that's why it does take a little bit of time to get services going. Next slide. All right. So all the services that we provide, so all the services that are going to be listed on your plan have to be necessary, appropriate, and of least possible cost. So everything that we provide to you when we're going through comprehensive assessment has to be necessary in order for you to reach that employment goal. So if someone's coming to me saying, hey, I want to work at a daycare, can you buy me a really fancy car so that I can get back and forth to daycare? Well, that's not going to be necessary to work at a daycare because maybe they live on the bus route and we could help with the purchase of a bus pass to get them back and forth. So again, it has to be necessary for what they want to do. It also has to be appropriate. So, if someone's telling me that someone needs this really confusing program to work at their job, and I don't even understand that program, I'm probably going to work with that person to identify a program that's more appropriate for them before we go towards purchasing a program that's going to be maybe really expensive and may not set that person up for success. So again, that's what really goes into that appropriate part of the services that we do. And then with least possible cost, we always take necessary and appropriate first into account, but then least possible cost does always get taken into account. So one thing that we run into with supporting students through inclusive higher ed programs is if they want to attend an inclusive higher ed program in a different state. So if we compared that program to some of our other programs here in the state of Colorado, and they will meet the same needs as that other program out of state. Maybe there's still an appropriate program for that person. They have the program they want to go through at their inclusive higher ed institute, but it's like twice the cost. Yeah, DVR is probably going to support the cost of the one in Colorado, not sending the student out of state. So that's usually where least possible cost comes into play with inclusive higher ed. Of course, the student still has the opportunity to attend the one out of state, but DVR may only fund what it would cost to attend in state, and then the student would be responsible for paying the remainder. Okay. Next slide. All right. So there's going to be lots of different avenues to employment. So when I had talked about just those core set of services, that's what we call just the direct avenue to competitive integrated employment. Someone's coming to us saying, I just want a job. And so we're going to provide those core set of services to that individual to help them get that job. Another avenue might be the supported employment avenue. And that is for our individuals who just need a little bit more support than just your typical person coming through needing a job. So this is where maybe they've never worked out in a community job before. Maybe they've only worked at jobs within like their day program or through their community center board. So maybe they don't have some experience working out in the community. So we can provide that higher level service to get them out into the community. Or maybe they need services even after their DVR case has been successfully closed. They still need someone supporting them to keep their job. So we can absolutely offer that higher level of services through those supported employment services. Maybe someone wants to go the self-employment avenue. Maybe they have a business that they want to grow and expand, and DVR has different services that we can provide to support that self-employment avenue if that's something that they're interested in. And then the business enterprise program. This is something that is specific for individuals who are blind and low vision. A lot of times you see those vending machines that are in government buildings, and those are through our business enterprise program. And we can assist individuals that are blind or low vision that are wanting to pursue that type of employment avenue. Okay, next slide. And then why we're here today to talk about the Inclusive Higher Ed Avenue. That's another avenue that we do. So when DVR is supporting someone with the Inclusive Higher Ed Avenue, we pay for it and support it financially in a few different ways. So again, it's all going to be based on that financial needs analysis that you're going to do with the DVR counselor. So the information I'm going to give you is just going to be very general, because when you have a case with DVR, the financial piece is going to be individualized to each person that applies. So I'm giving you the information just from a general perspective. But if you qualify financially, so let's say maybe you do not have a contribution and DVR is going to pay for the services, the first thing we could do is we could pay for the tuition at the university. So when you're attending an inclusive higher ed program, you have the inclusive higher ed program bill, and then you also have the tuition bill. So DVR can support with that tuition piece. Our inclusive higher ed programs have what's called a program fee. DVR cannot support the cost of that program fee. So we can support the tuition, and we can support what's called the inclusive higher ed skills training fee. That's the cost of the program. But these other programs have an additional program fee, and that is something DVR can't pay for. So that is where the individual would need to either fund it themselves if they have a family that could support funding that, or maybe they have employment wages that could fund that, or you can also use your financial aid to help fund that. So if you have applied to FAFSA and you've gotten that Pell Grant, that money can be used for that. Elise had talked a little bit about ABLE accounts earlier. If you have some money in an ABLE account, that can be used to pay towards that program fee. So there's different ways that program fee can be paid. But do just note that if you do qualify financially, DVR can pay for the tuition and pay for the inclusive higher ed skills training fee, but unfortunately we cannot pay that program fee. So don't want anyone to be surprised if you get a bill in the mail for the program fee, because that is something that DVR is unable to pay, because it does fall out of the scope of vocational services, and that's why we can't pay it. That's unfortunately the federal government telling us we're not allowed to do it. So we got to follow those rules. Okay, next
Darby,
slide.
can I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
So this is Julie Harmon from the UCCS, and I'm interested to hear you say that the financial aid can be applied to the program fee, because what we have happen is DVR takes the federal funding out of the tuition. So that financial aid is benefiting DVR, not the family. So I'm interested if we're not doing something right, because I'm surprised to hear you say that.
Yeah, and this is so unfortunately, different offices have been doing it a little bit differently than others. And so this is something that we are currently working on, because as you know, with our DVR fee schedule and policy and stuff, there's lots of gray area to it. And so this is something that we are working on getting into policy to be black and white, because it is there. The program fee is a fee, and financial aid is used to pay tuition and fees. So they can absolutely utilize, and Julie, we just did a training with the Colorado Springs office earlier this week, and so they are aware of this. And so so we can absolutely utilize that Pell Grant money, that financial aid money, to pay that program fee. And then, so like the example I gave, let's say they get $4,500 from Pell, or $5,000 from Pell, and your program fee is $4,500. They would use $4,500 of that $5,000.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Okay.
Yeah. And then that remaining 500 would go towards tuition and their other fees, and then DVR would pay whatever's remainder.
Okay. So moving forward, how do we communicate that? Do we?
Yeah, so I am in the process of getting something scheduled with Shayna so that we can get all on the same page and then we're going to meet with the DVR office to make sure we're in, and then we're going to bring you in as well. So Julie, do just know it's coming. We're
perfect. I'm so glad to hear that, because I always was worried about some of our families who would end up not getting any benefit from the financial aid component. And not to say DVR is not financially helping them. I get that. But they also were having this fee. And I'm like, I wonder if we could split that. And I do think it's done differently because other DVR offices don't do that. Like the Pell Grant or financial aid will go to, and scholarships will go to that fee. And then anything left, DVR takes that and applies it towards tuition and then pays the balance. But it's not across the board. So I'm really glad to hear that there's going to be a kind of concrete way to look at that. So that I'm glad you said that, because that popped in my head that wasn't how it was going for most of our students. So that's great.
Yeah, so be on the lookout. We'll bring you into a
Perfect.
meeting so that everybody can get on the same
Perfect.
page.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, next slide. All right. And just to quickly go through just some of our commonly used services. So again, these are a lot of just our core set of services, the job prep and development, helping people get jobs and keep jobs, job coaching once they have the job, helping them keep that job, training. That's where inclusive higher ed falls into. So when someone wants to go to training, that's where we need to do the financial needs analysis and see if they qualify for us to send them to training. And then assistive technology, what kind of tools can we get them to remove some of those barriers? And again, these are all things that may come after the training. So those core set of services of job prep and development and job coaching, we may pay for the inclusive higher ed piece and get you that training, but we're going to stay with you and get you all the way into a job. So just because you graduate from the inclusive higher ed program, you're not done with DVR. We're going to stick with you and we're going to get you all the way into a job that you want to have. Okay, next slide. All right. And then ultimately, our goal is to get you the job, which is achieving the outcome, helping you keep the job, which is maintaining the outcome, and then successfully closing your case. And that's the outcome satisfactory. So that's really what we want to see through all of this. All right, I think there's a little bit in there. Yeah, so this just gives you some numbers of how many successful closures we've had, and then the average wage that we're seeing people get. So the $18.73 an hour and annually $37,460 a year. Of course, this is all going to be individualized to every person, but this is just some of the information that we had from our last annual report. All right, next slide. All right, so that is it for me. Sorry, we went over a few minutes. You guys had great questions, and I'm happy to take a few more questions if you guys have any. Yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, hi. I have a prospective student. He's graduating this year and is probably going to end up either at UNC or Metro. So this is refreshing to hear, because in my mind I thought we were footing the entire bill. When they look at financial need, are they looking at his finances or our finances? He has applied for SSI, but we're just in that process, the waiting game to be successful at that, hopefully.
Yeah, so it's going to depend on kind of where he's at when you file taxes. If you still claim him as an independent, we do have to look at your finances. But if he is independent and he files his own taxes independently, then we would just look at his.
Oh, I just filed taxes. That's unfortunate.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. But
So
you know
would
what?
that
Let's say maybe the first year you may have a contribution before
Okay.
DVR pays, but then you'll know that for next year. So just because they do the financial needs analysis 1 year, if the financial situation changes, just let them know that it's changed, and they can update that financial needs analysis. So if he qualifies for Social Security, they'll update it and reflect that, and then there'll be no contribution.
Okay, so if we did file taxes like this year, obviously we claimed as a dependent, but then he gets SSI, then he automatically doesn't have to do that same needs analysis?
Yes, so SSI makes someone exempt for a financial
Okay.
contribution. Yep.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you. That
Yeah, of
helps.
course. Yeah.